The art of ranking NBA players can be difficult at times because greatness has a different definition depending on who you speak to. To some, it may mean sustained dominance. To others, it may mean reaching a peak higher than anyone else. To a third party, it may mean individual skill. In some way or another, I'll be using all three of those metrics to determine who my 10 greatest NBA players of all time are. Now, this is an exercise I go through almost yearly, and shockingly enough, my opinion changes quite a lot over time. But the one idea I try to remain consistent on is, in regards to looking at individual skill, comparing players based on their talent to their relative era. We can all agree that if you teleport someone like Bill Russell into the 2020s, that he wouldn't win 11 NBA championships in his career. But in the 1960s, Russell was an unstoppable force of nature that dominated opposing centers and won 11 titles. Throughout this exercise, I'll be looking at Russell's skill compared to other 60s centers rather than comparing his skill to modern bigs. Though I will say that I'm also going to be keeping in mind the talent pool of players during each specific era that these players played in. And lastly, this video is not created to create some form of controversy or clickbait or anything like that. This is solely my opinion on the history of basketball, and I'm sure you have your opinion on the history of basketball too. So if you agree, or if you disagree, or actually let me rephrase that. When you disagree with any of the rankings I have in this video, feel free to comment your thoughts down below, and I'll share my thoughts with you in the comments below as well. So without further ado, let's start at number 10. Shaquille O'Neal had arguably the most physically dominant prime in the history of the NBA, leading a not-so-talented Orlando Magic team to the NBA Finals in only his third year in the league, and reviving a Lakers team that hadn't seen success in almost a decade, and leading them to 3 straight NBA titles. Shaq made 14 straight All-NBA appearances in his prime, with 8 of those 14 being All-NBA first-team selections, and he did it as an otherworldly scorer at the center position, something that in the history of the NBA isn't very common. Since 1970, so we're talking 56 years of history here, Shaq was only one of 4 centers to lead the NBA in scoring twice, joining the club with 3 former MVPs. What made him such a special scorer was his unique combination of size and athleticism. Shaq had the ability to completely overpower you in the paint, or take you on the block and beat you with great footwork and touch at the rim. He used his physical advantages in a way you would want a 7'1", 325-pound monster to use them. Even in the later stages of his career, Shaq maintained his special abilities, but he also understood what his role needed to be for his team to win. The greatest example of this came in the 2006 playoffs, as while Shaq finished as an All-NBA first-team selection that season, he took the backseat to a 24-year-old Dwayne Wade and provided the perfect complement to secure his 4th NBA title. There's certainly things you could take away from Shaq's greatness, like his lack of effort in portions of the regular season that ultimately shows when you look at his resume as arguably the most dominant player of the 21st century and you see only 1 MVP next to his name. But in an age where conditioning and availability are sometimes a question mark for the game's top stars, Shaq maintained an impressive streak of starting 164 consecutive playoff games before ultimately missing 2 games in the 2005 playoffs. Still, it showed that when his team needed him most, Shaq delivered. And with 4 titles and 3 finals MVPs on his mantle, you certainly can't argue against that. Most of the players that we'll see on this list were drafted number 1 overall, and of course Hakeem Olajuwon is no exception. But it's funny that a player who will be on this list later was drafted 2 picks after Hakeem, yet I still feel as though the Rockets made a defensible decision. Olajuwon was a standout at the University of Houston, guiding them to 3 Final Four appearances and 2 national championship appearances, all while averaging a mind-blowing 4.5 blocks per game. This made his selection as the first overall pick a no-brainer, and his impact was immediately felt, as in just Olajuwon's 2nd season, the Rockets were in the NBA Finals and Olajuwon finished 4th in MVP voting. That 1986 breakout kicked off a stretch of 13 seasons, where Olajuwon cemented himself as one of the greatest defenders in NBA history, finishing with 9 all-defensive selections and 2 back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards in 1993 and 1994. That 1994 season was also one of the greatest individual seasons in NBA history, as Olajuwon Olajuwon became the only player in NBA history to have ever won the Defensive Player of the Year, regular season MVP, and Finals MVP all in the same season. He added another Finals MVP trophy in 1995, despite the Rockets not having an all-star selection other than Hakeem. Olajuwon finished his career at 10 seasons with a top 10 finish in MVP voting, and the NBA record for most blocks in a career, which, if you averaged it out, would equal to 3.1 blocks per game, the same per game average that 7'5" Victor Wembanyama had in the 2026 season. Olajuwon was a generational defender, and arguably the greatest defender the NBA has ever seen. To this day, we see younger stars like Wembanyama and the Houston Rockets' Alperen Şengün flock to Olajuwon for training in the post, as Hakeem's dream shake is, to this day, one of the most unstoppable moves in NBA history. No matter how you view what greatness means, Olajuwon checks all of the boxes, yet for some reason, he still remains one of the most underrated players in NBA history. Everywhere Magic Johnson went, his team won. In 3 seasons at Everett High School, Magic accumulated a 73-5 record, winning the first district and state basketball championship in his school's history. As a freshman in college, Magic led the Michigan State Spartans to their first 20-win season in school history. In his sophomore year, he took the Spartans all the way to the national championship. This led to an obvious choice for the Lakers in the 1979 draft. They selected Magic Johnson with the first overall pick and trusted him to lead the Lakers to an NBA title, something LA only achieved once in the previous 25 years. And just like at every stop before LA, Magic did just that and more. Though his playing career was brief compared to other all-time greats, Magic Johnson quickly established himself as one of the most dominant guards in NBA history, highlighted by his coming-out party in Game 6 of the 1980 NBA Finals, where Magic led the Lakers to an NBA title with a 42-point, 15-rebound, and 7-assist masterclass. In the following seasons, Magic would take the Lakers to 4 more NBA titles, with 3 of those coming within a 4-year stretch. And starting from 1983 to 1991, Magic rattled off a 9-year stretch where he finished in the top 3 of MVP voting in each and every year. His impact as a scorer, passer, rebounder, and transition starter made his style of play almost unstoppable. If you're making a Mount Rushmore of NBA players who changed the game, Magic Johnson would be a lock on that monument. And while you could nitpick certain things about his game, like his meltdown in the 1984 finals that brought upon the Tragic Johnson nickname, or the diminishing defense that all in all hurt the Lakers in the late 80s, there's no denying that Magic Johnson is an all-time great, and one of the biggest reasons why the NBA plays the way it does. Alongside Magic Johnson in revolutionizing the game is Larry Bird, the 6'9" Indiana State forward whose all-around game brought the Celtics back from irrelevancy to title contention. Just like Magic, Bird's first season in the NBA changed his franchise's direction, as the Celtics went from a 29-53 record in 1979 to a 61-21 record in 1980. This led to Bird's first of 9 straight All-NBA first-team selections from 1980 to 1988. In that stretch, Bird also took home 3 NBA titles, 2 Finals MVPs, 3 All-Defensive Team selections, and a period of 8 years, from 1981 to 1988, where Bird finished top 3 in MVP voting in each season. Bird ultimately won 3 MVPs in that time frame, all back-to-back-to-back, becoming the most recent player to achieve that honor. Ultimately though, many will remember Bird for his trash talking and his ability to back up every word he said. This talk reached a peak in a 1986 regular season game against the Trailblazers, where Bird was apparently so bored of beating opponents with his right hand that he decided to shoot only with his left hand for most of the game. Bird ended the contest with 47 points, 14 rebounds, and 11 assists, as well as the game-winning shot, which was ultimately taken with a right-handed jump shot. Throughout his 13-year career, Bird showed that he had every desirable skill that you look for in an all-time forward. He could score at all 3 levels, play make at a high rate, and defend the best players in the world. As an all-around option, Bird bested some of the greatest players to ever play the sport, and he talked a little trash to their face as well. Though Bird's career was cut short due to lingering back problems, his impact as a 3-time MVP and the top option on 3 championship teams is more than enough to secure his spot as a top 10 player of all time. Kobe Bryant has somehow become the most underrated and overrated player in NBA history. Those that rank him outside the top 15 players of all time disregard his 5 NBA titles, 18 All-Star appearances, and 15 consecutive All-NBA appearances, with 11 of those being a first-team selection, which is the second most in NBA history. They take away his natural ability to put the ball in the hoop, his 1 regular season MVP that could have arguably been 2 or 3, and his 12 all-defensive selections, also the second most in NBA history. They disregard the greatness to coexist with Shaq in the early 2000s, the heroics he pulled on most nights to drag a truly terrible Lakers team to the playoffs in the mid-2000s, and the craftiness he developed to lead the Lakers to 2 more titles in the late 2000s. Just off his resume alone, he is easily one of the greatest to ever step foot on a basketball court. But to those who view him as one of the 3 greatest NBA players in history, well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far. His resume is great, don't get me wrong, but compared to the players above him, it's just not on their level. His ability to score was great, don't get me wrong, but in an age of modern advanced stats, Kobe Bryant's play style has become polarizing, with many looking down on Kobe being a quote-unquote ball hog who chucks up shots. Honestly, I land somewhere in the middle, because while his style of play wasn't the most efficient, he won championships and brought LA relevancy. This is probably the highest I would ever rank Kobe Bryant, and you could probably make the argument that he deserves to be lower on the list, or maybe not even on the list at all. But when you look at the peak of his powers as an MVP and the best player on multiple title teams, and when you see that his prime lasted roughly 15 years, it's hard to deny that level of greatness. When you talk about dominance in the NBA, one of the first names that should be mentioned is Bill Russell. You may know Russell from the iconic photo, showing off just 7 of his record 11 NBA championship rings, or you may know him as the guy who completely decimated the competition of the 1960s. There's all-time greats like Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and Oscar Robertson, who finished with a combined 2 NBA titles in their careers because Russell was just that dominant. Russell's rival, Wilt Chamberlain, finished with just 2 NBA titles in his career, and Russell won the all-time playoff matchup against Chamberlain, beating him 7 out of the 8 playoff series in which they competed. As a whole, Bill Russell's peak, while lasting only a decade, brought him 5 MVP awards, 4 more top 3 finishes in MVP voting, 5 separate seasons as the NBA's rebounding champion, and he led the Celtics to the #1 defense in the NBA in 12 of his 13 seasons in the league. Resume for resume and peak for peak, it doesn't get much better than Russell. You could certainly drop Russell's placement on this list for his lackluster offensive skill or the level of competition he's dominating, which is honestly the only 2 reasons why Russell shouldn't top anyone's greatest players list. But not to take away from Wilt Chamberlain's greatness, who, spoiler alert, isn't on this list, but certainly deserves to be a top 15 player of all time, Russell completely dominated him. Sure, you could argue that Russell's teams were better in the early stages of Wilt's career, and I couldn't argue with you on that. But from 1966 to 1969, the 4 years where Wilt's teams were better than the Celtics, Russell won 3 of the 4 matchups. Russell is the ultimate winner and ceiling raiser who absolutely deserves to be mentioned as one of the 10 greatest players in NBA history. Maybe the biggest benefactor of me revisiting all-time rankings is Tim Duncan, who slowly but surely continues to creep up my rankings now to what will ultimately be his highest rank ever at number 4. You could make a lot of arguments as to why Tim Duncan should be lower on this list, and I would listen to them and maybe even agree with your logic. In my mind, everyone on this list ranked 4 through 8 could be interchangeable, and I wouldn't be mad at it. But when you think of consistent dominance on both ends of the floor, only a couple of players in NBA history can touch what Duncan did for the Spurs. Before Duncan's arrival in San Antonio, the Spurs were a team who could never get over the hump. Their losses to the Jazz and Rockets in the mid-90s haunted their superstar David Robinson, who by the time 1998 came along was nowhere near his peak just a couple of years earlier. Enter Tim Duncan, the #1 overall pick who completely revitalized the Spurs, earning an All-NBA first-team selection as a rookie, only the second player since 1970 to do so, and bringing the Spurs back into title contention. Of course, the Spurs would get over the hump in the 1999 playoffs, winning their franchise's first NBA title, and Duncan would lead them back to the promised land 4 more times over the next 17 years. In that span, Duncan earned 2 MVPs, 15 All-NBA selections, including a first-team appearance at age 36 and a third-team appearance at age 38. as well as 15 all-defensive selections as inarguably the greatest defender to never win the Defensive Player of the Year award. Duncan could truly demoralize you on both ends of the floor, and many people didn't recognize it due to his less than flashy playstyle. While other all-time greats feature signature moves like Hakeem's Dream Shake, Magic's no-look pass, or Kobe's fadeaway mid-range, Duncan's go-to was a bank shot, something that I feel as though perfectly encapsulates his career. It's not the flashiest and maybe not the most fun to watch, but night in and night out, the shot went in. The greatness of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has unfortunately been encapsulated as an unquestionable premise. No matter how you view it, the top 2 players in NBA history are there in some order, and then there's Kareem at number 3. And while we continue to have debates on the legacies of the players I've mentioned throughout this video, Kareem is just pigeonholed as the 3rd greatest player to pick up a basketball. It's certainly not the worst life to live, but it's not fair considering the impact he had on the NBA. Kareem entered the NBA as one of the first generational prospects the sport had ever seen. He immediately rattled off a legendary 6-year run with the Milwaukee Bucks, winning 3 MVPs and bringing the Bucks their first franchise title. Later, he requested a trade to the Lakers, winning another 3 MVPs and in the 1980s winning 5 NBA titles. Kareem became the most impactful big in NBA history on both ends of the floor, making an All-NBA team in 15 of his first 17 years in the NBA, and making 11 total All-Defensive teams. At his peak, Kareem was an unstoppable force on both sides of the floor, who, even at 40 years old, was an impactful player on a championship team. His skyhook is now one of the most iconic moves in NBA history for Kareem's ability to rise above each and every defender and finish with ridiculous touch at the rim. But beyond that, his ability as a paint presence on both sides of the ball is understated to this day and deserves more love in these conversations. The worst part of ranking the greatest players of all time is revealing who's in your top 2, because one way or another people will be upset. I personally believe that in terms of pure talent, there has never been a better player than LeBron James. His combination of size and finesse is unmatched. This is the same guy whose playmaking can match a prime Magic Johnson, whose defense can match any lockdown's ability, and whose scoring is, in total, the highest in NBA history. But these are all things you already know. And while I personally believe that in terms of greatness of their careers, one man does eclipse LeBron, there is no need to take away from his legacy. This is a 4-time league MVP, and you could argue that he should be a 5 or 6-time MVP. He's a 22-time All-Star, 21-time All-NBA selection, a 6-time All-Defensive selection, and a 4-time NBA champion. His individual peak is one of the highest in NBA history, and his impact on the sport is immeasurable. I won't use this time to say why LeBron isn't worthy of being the greatest player of all time, because when it comes down to it, this is all just a matter of preference and how you view an individual's career and what you value more. There's no denying that the consistency of LeBron's career from start to finish as a top player in this league is unprecedented and truly great. This is an about-to-be 42-year-old whose free agent decision could genuinely impact the NBA title scene next year. This is also a player whose past downfalls were immediately redeemed through clutch performance after clutch performance in the playoffs. Again, in terms of greatness, LeBron is near the top of the top, and to many, LeBron is the greatest player in NBA history. From my perspective though, the greatest player in NBA history is Michael Jordan. Peak for peak, prime for prime, Michael Jordan was historically dominant and took a middling franchise and made them basketball royalty. I don't need to remind you of Jordan's perfect 6-0 record in the NBA Finals, his 5 MVP awards, his Defensive Player of the Year award, his 10 All-NBA first-team selections, and his record 10 scoring titles. Michael Jordan dissected and broke down opponents, most famously in the 1992 Finals. It was here that Jordan was widely compared with Clyde Drexler, the man who finished second in MVP voting to Jordan, who, in his own right, was a great offensive player. It was in this series that Jordan drained 6 threes in the first half of Game 1, shrugging towards the commentary desk in a move that only cemented his greatness. From there, Jordan took down some of the best the NBA had to offer throughout the playoffs, from Magic Johnson and Charles Barkley to Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Shaquille O'Neal. In terms of winning titles, winning individual accolades, dominating the opposing competition, nobody can mess with Jordan during the Bulls' 2 three-peats in the 90s. To this day, he has maintained the highest individual peak any NBA player has ever had, and he did it for over a decade. All in all, I don't believe there's a player who has ever matched Jordan's peak, much less for how long he did it. Of course, you may very well disagree with that thought process, so if you disagree with any of my rankings, maybe you think LeBron is the greatest player ever, Tim Duncan or Bill Russell don't deserve to be in the top 5, maybe I'm missing someone like Steph Curry or Wilt Chamberlain on this list. Whatever you think, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more NBA videos just like this one. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.